Hey, this is Pete Madsen for Acoustic Guitar, and I'm here to present my weekly workout lesson on using the CAGED system for fingerstyle blues. If you've been playing fingerstyle blues for a little bit, you know some songs. You've probably noticed you're playing in first position quite a bit, like basic cowboy chords. So you may be thinking, okay, I know these songs, I got that fingerstyle, alternating bass, monotonic bass stuff down. What next? Well, I like to use the CAGED system to help me come up with verse variations. So what we're going to do in this lesson is we're going to look at different ways to make seventh chords using the CAGED system. We're going to play in the key of E. Guitar players love the key of E. I also did a lesson on this a few years back with acoustic guitar using the song Stag a Lee, which is in the key of D. So if you want to go back and look at that one, I'm using the same kind of ideas, but now I'm using them in a different key, and I'll do a few different things with the CAGED shapes. So first off, week one, example one, I'm going to take a group of E7 chords. The first one is sort of the basic two-finger E7 that most people know, and we'll call that an E shape. The next one looks like this. This is the second one on the page, and this is a D shape. You can notice it looks like a D7, if you're familiar with D7. If I move that up 2 frets and I add my first finger to the 4th string, it's an E7. All right. The next one up is a C7 shape. If you know your C7 here in first position, if you move it up till your first finger gets to the 5th fret, you have a C7. The next one up is an A7 shape. And that looks just like, that's A7. Move it on up till those fingers get to the 9th fret. And then I could use my first finger to bar. And I've got an E7 chord. And then finally, I'm going to use this shape for G7. And this might be harder to recognize. A G7 looks like this, right? Well, we're kind of using the top part of that shape. If we did the full shape, it's really hard to do. So I trim it down, and I'm just using 4 strings, barring at the 9th fret, and using my second finger to play the D note here at the 10th fret. Okay, so those are our 5 CAGED shapes for E7. In example 2, I'm going to play a very basic finger picking pattern, and I'm going to use this as a template for most of the examples in the following parts of the lesson. So I'm going to start off with my D-shaped E7 chord. I'm using an alternating bass, so I'm moving between the 6 and the 4 strings. My thumb is moving back and forth between 6 and 4 string. Now, if you haven't worked out playing alternating bass or monotonic bass, you may want to step back and actually study that a little bit before you get into the nuts and bolts of this lesson. I'm assuming you've done a little bit of this. So, as far as finger picking and which fingers to use with which strings, index finger I'm going to use for the 3rd string, middle finger for the 2nd string, and ring finger for the 1st string. Okay, so here's example 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Play that again. Okay, example 3. If you remember the C shape we played a few minutes ago, I'm going to modify this a little bit. I'm going to take my pinky away and put my ring finger where my pinky was, and then put my pinky on the 1st string. Think of this as a modified C shape. So now I can still do my alternating bass between the 6th and the 4th string. And here's example 3 with the finger picking. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again. Example 4 I'm going to do my G-shaped E7 chord. Remember, this is an abbreviated version of the chord. The full chord would be a little difficult to do. So think of this as a small version of a G7 shape. And using the same finger picking pattern, example 4 sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again. Okay, week 2, we're going to look at a series of A7 chords. So starting off with our normal A shape, A7 with an A shape. The G shape, remember the full G shape would look like that, but we're going to get rid of the little finger and the ring finger. We're going to bar 4 strings, and we're leaving the 5th string open. For all these chords, I'm leaving my open A string open because these are all A chords. Okay, so that's a G shape. Moving up to the 5th fret, still barring 4 strings. Middle finger on the 3rd string. And this is like an E shape. So if you know your normal bar chord E shapes, it would look, the full shape would look like that. But again, we're using the open 5th string. All right. D shape is next. First finger slides up to the 7th fret, and then I put the rest of the fingers into my D shape. And then finally, I'm going to use that modified C shape that I used for the E chord. I use this. This is going to be my modified C shape for the A chord. Okay, so let's look at a few ideas using the E shape. This is example 6. I'm alternating the bass here between the 5th and the 4th string. Right? Now, if you notice, I'm only using 2 fingers, so this leaves my ring finger and my pinky free to do ornaments and add things to the chord that sound really nice. Example 7, I'm going to do a descending melody which reascends using my ring finger and my pinky. So here's example 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I use my pinky to play the 7th fret on the 1st string. I have my bar ready for the 5th fret. Then I move my pinky over to the 8th fret on the 2nd string, slid it back to the 7th fret, did a hammer on here. This bridges the 2 measures, and reascended. Okay, so just so you know, while these chords, these A chords, I'm all using the open A string, right? But I could use these as movable chord shapes by simply wrapping my thumb over the 6th string and grabbing it like so. Now my alternating bass is going between the 6th and the 4th string. And here's example 8. Played some double stops there, 1st and 2nd string, 3rd and 2nd string, up to the 8th fret, 7th fret. So if I wanted to play in a different key where I didn't have open strings, I could use this chord shape. It's like use G. So this will give you a taste of that without having the open strings for you. We can also move between these different shapes of the CAGED system. So again, I'm back here with my E shape, and I'm going to move from an E shape up to a D shape. This is example 9. 1, 2, 3, 4. So notice what I did there. I had my E shape. I brought my pinky in to play the 7th fret, which I slid up to the 9th fret, and then I placed the rest of my fingers down to get into my D shape. Okay, week 3. It's going to be a series of B7 chords. And the first one we're going to play should be familiar to you. If you played a blues in E, you've most likely played in a B7. It looks like this. What you may not realize is that is actually a C shape. If you took these 3 strings and just moved them up 1 fret, you would see you're almost into a C7 shape. So think of the B7 here that you already know as being a C shape. Then I'm going to play an A shape. Here I'm barring 5 strings. Before that I was just barring 4 strings, but now I'm barring 5. Here comes my abbreviated G shape up at the 4th fret. I'm going to add my 3rd finger into the mix, and I want that so I can get an alternating bass between the 5th and the 4th string. Remember that E shape we talked about wrapping your thumb over for A? So I moved that 2 frets up. That is an E-shaped B7 chord. And finally, I'm going to do my D-shaped B7 chord, but I'm going to bar 2 strings here. Well, barring 5 strings, but by barring the 5th and the 4th string, I can now get an alternating bass on the 5th and 4th string. Okay, example 11. I'm going to take our first position B7 chord and add some pull-offs to the mix. Do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm using my pinky to do some ornaments here. I'm doing a pull-off. And to get a clean sound with the pull-off, I suggest you try to pull down a little bit so you get a nice clean sounding pull-off. I do the same thing on the 2nd string at the 3rd fret. There you go. Clean as I can. Example 12, I'm going to go for that G shape, barring 4 strings and having my ring finger to the 5th string. And then I'm going to play another pull-off here, and use pinky and 2nd string to have a descending melody. I'll do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now we're into week 4. We're going to do a complete 12-bar blues with E, A, and B7 chords. Let me play through it once, and then I'll explain what's happening. Okay, so the first 4 bars of our 12 bars are all the 1 chord, that is E. So I can do some movement. I don't want to just stay on one. I mean, I could stay on just the 1 position chord, it would sound fine. But I wanted to show you how you could move between these chords. So I start off with my D7 shape. And then I'm going to slide with my pinky up to the 7th fret and then bring in the rest of my fingers for my E7 shape. Now in the 3rd bar, I'm going to slide up to the 9th fret. And if you're familiar with people like Big Bill Brunsey, he would use chord shapes like this up here quite a bit. And then I'm going to grab the 12th fret and do a pull off to the 10th fret, to the 9th fret, 2nd string 12th fret, 10th fret, play bars 3 and 4 again. Okay, so that's my first 4 bars of E. Now I slide down to an A7 using a D7 shape. Notice I'll take the pinky off as I work my way down to an E-shaped A7 chord. And here I'm going to throw in this kind of flat 9 chord. It's got a nice little descending melody that occurs between those two shapes. Back to E7, and I'm going to use the most convenient chord at my disposal, which is the C shape. Now this chord, I'm doing another descending melody, 7th fret, 5th fret, 4th fret. You notice that's a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think it's too bad. So if you can't do it there, you can do something like on the 2nd string there. And then I'm just holding 2 fingers down for the rest of that bar. I work my way to the B7 chord, descending the melody again. Notice I go from the 5th fret to the 4th fret, and then I'm going to slide into my first position. Keeps the descending melody going. Okay. For my last 2 bars, I'm just going to play a series of E chords up the neck. Moving from a D7 shape to a C7 shape to a G7 shape, extend the pinky out, just grab the triad, back to the 7, C shape, D shape, first position E7. Brings everything full circle. Let me play example 13 again. Okay, for taking this to the next level, you can actually break these chord shapes down a little bit. You don't necessarily always have to be playing a 4-fingered or 5-fingered version of the chord. In the take it to the next level example, let me play that first. So what I did is I take a D7 shaped A7 and just move it down 1 fret at a time as I make my way into a normal A triad. This is similar to what you would hear Robert Johnson do in songs like Kind-Hearted Woman. And then the next measure, another sort of Robert Johnson voicing of an A7 chord. It's basically an E shape reduced down to the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings. And then I go to an E. I'm using that same D shape, but I'm not using a 4th string version. I'm using a 3-string version. And I'm modifying it by opening up the 1st string, move up to, would be a partial C shape. So I'm just using 3 strings instead of 4 or 5. And then this last one is basically modification of an A-shaped E7. So I would invite you to look at the chord shapes you already know and try to modify them. You can do 2-string versions, 3-string versions, 4-string versions. You can use an alternating bass. You could leave the bass out at certain times so that you can create this movement between the different chord shapes. And I think you'll find that this will really open up your fingerstyle blues world. Especially effective if you're a singer and you know the songs, you know how to play them, but you want an instrumental break. Try using these CAGED system ideas, and I think you'll love it.